Okay, students, so welcome back again for our new lecture. So in this video, I'm going to explain you some concepts that we will be implementing in our class on Monday. But here I am going to explain you that theoretical part of that particular specific concepts and techniques that we are going to learn in our next class. And you need to see this video before you can come to the class. So let's start. So we have already seen our databases part. So we have seen that how we can connect with our database, how we can save the information, how we can retrieve the information, and how we can play for that particular database storage. And you are supposed to submit your STLT04 over this weekend, and you must have some experience with that. So now there are other ways to store the data. For application data, we can store in a different way. We have the internal file system. Internal file system mean that this is the files, the place within your memory, within your mobile. Okay, so this is an internal file storage where you can save different type of files, text files, document files, Excel files, whatever you want to see. Depending on your application, you can save those files over there. And we also have the external file storage. External file storage is more like, we have the external SD cards that we can plug in with our mobiles. So if you want to save something on the external storage, that is the SD cards or some other external storage which is connected with your mobile, that you can save over there. And the other way is the shared preferences. What Today we will be covering this shared preferences, how we can save the information inside that particular specific shared preferences object. This object is actually saving the data permanently in your mobile. Permanently mean that yes, we are interacting with that particular specific shared object, but shared preferences object, but actually it is representing a file within your internal file storage, where your application data is being stored automatically by the Android system. So it is actually representing that particular permanent file inside your internal file storage. So let's start with that particular specific shared preferences. So shared preferences, again, if you click on that particular specific link, it will take you the documentation of that. So it's a limited simple data without structure. Simple data. I mean, remember that we have put some key value pairs inside our intent object to pass between different activities and different processes as a message. So we can put the key value pair over there. So here we can put a key value pair. Key will be the name of that particular specific value that you want to save in that shared preference, and the value will be itself the actual data that you want to save in that shared preferences. So XML files that persist across user sessions, again, these are the XML files in the background that are automatically managed by the Android framework. We don't need to worry about that, but these are the XML files. In the XML files, we have a tag, and inside the tag, we have some value. Tag is actually the key, and the value or the data will go in that particular specific tag. And then whenever we want to retrieve, we just need to provide that key value or key information. So key information is being received, and then it will try to extract the value from that particular XML file. So for example, we have the highest user scores. I mean, if you are playing some game, then you are playing in game in your computer or your mobile, then you need you see in the what are the highest score that you have achieved in that particular specific game. It is always there. Okay, so ringtone, if you want to specify a specific ringtone or specific contact number, you have some special to your brother, to your sister, to your friends, to your mother, to your father, you can specify different ringtones. So looking at the ringtone, you can tell who is calling. Again, we can customize. Some applications allow us to customize the color scheme of their application. So we can save all these kind of information inside our shared preferences. So this is the purpose of the shared preferences. And again, shared preferences is a object which actually pointing towards an XML file, permanent storage file inside your internal storage. And using that particular shared preferences object, we can communicate, we can manipulate that particular XML file, but we cannot access it directly. That is managed and saved by the Android framework. So again, as I told you that shared preference is a pointer to a file containing key value pairs managed by the framework. So we have two types of the shared preferences. One is the private and the other one is the shared. Depending on how you are creating it, and how you are trying to open that particular specific shared file. If you have that get shared preferences, it is a shared and it also has a specific name. It means that this particular specific preference, shared preferences file, the XML file, and then the object, it can be accessed from any activity within that particular specific application. We have main activity, then we have second activity, then we have third activity, then we have fourth activity. So we have multiple activities within our application. If we are having the shared preferences with which need to be identified by a specific name, then this particular specific shared preferences can be accessed from any activity. Any activity can call this particular specific method get shared preferences and provide the name of that particular shared preferences object, and then it can access, it can read the information, it can write the information, it can change the information. So it can do a lot of things over there. So this is a shared information among different activities. So this is another way to share the information for different activities which are present inside our application. For example, you have an application in which you have saved the information about that user, first name, last name, and some other information, and then you want to share, you want to say show these informations, you want to share these informations among different activities within that particular specific application. So you can save that those kind of information, the user information, inside a shared preferences object, and then it can be automatically shared among different activities within the application. The second way to create or open a shared preferences object is the get preferences, and this one is only for private data for a specific activity. Only this activity, whenever you are calling this particular specific get preferences, if there does not exist any shared preferences object for the current activity, then it will be created automatically and it will be identified by the system itself. It is not going to be managed by, we can't give the name to this one. Okay, so it is automatically managed and manipulated by the Android framework, but it is associated with this particular specific activity in which you have created or opened that particular specific shared preferences object. So this is only this particular shared preferences object is only for one activity. It cannot be shared across different activities. So let's start with the first one, how we can create a shared preferences object. Creating or opening is exactly the same. We can simply say that we are saying that shared preferences, we are creating the variable name, providing that particular specific variable, and then we say that get shared preferences, and now we need to provide the name shared preference. So again, as you see that it is a capital one, a constant string value that I have declared in my project. Okay, so that particular specific shared preferences name is coming from that particular. We can provide whatever name in the double quotes. It's a string value, string input, string parameter. Okay, so you can provide in the double quotes, you can provide the name of the shared preferences object, or the file, you can say that. And then what is the mode? I mean, we need to provide that different mode. I will discuss about these private modes during the class. Okay, so when I'm giving you the practical demonstration in the class, so we have different modes. We have private, we have public, so we have different type of access rights for that particular specific. Of course, we want to create it in a private mode, because this means that this particular specific shared preferences can only be accessed within the application. Out of the application, it is not possible. Okay, so this is the one way to create. And then we can need to, if you want, for example, you are coming in your application and you are right executing this particular specific lines, this specific command for the first time, what will happen? There does not exist any shared preferences object. So what it will do, it will create one for you. But next time, if you come again, second time, if you want to run it, it will not create a new one. Actually, it will open the already existing shared preferences object, and it will link it to that particular specific XML file, which is managed by the Android system. To change, to write certain information inside that particular specific object, specific shared preferences, then you need an editor. So what we are doing, we are saying that shared preferences, again we are using that particular specific main class dot editor. So we are inside that particular specific shared preferences, we have an editor, and then we are creating a specific object, specific variable name editor is equal to shared preferences dot edit. So we are calling inside our specific variable that we have created uh, in this particular specific line, opened or created a new one. So from that, we are calling that particular specific dot added method, which will return me an editor, and using that particular specific editor, we can write the data inside our shared preferences object. So how we can write it? So let's see. So we have our editor. So now we can simply say that editor dot put int. It means that we want to write an integer, we want to save an integer value inside our shared preferences object. And first of all, we need to provide the key, that is our key, that is the name that identify this particular specific 79 value inside our shared preferences object, and the XML file eventually. Editor dot put boolean, I mean we can dot put in dot put boolean, put string, put float, put long. So all those primitive data types which exist in Java, we can simply put using the key value pair. So we key will be the name of that particular specific value in our permanent storage file, and the value is itself. So we have string, we have float values, and you know that I have put this f. Why? Because by default 72.001 is considered as a double value. Whenever you are giving some value which has decimal point inside it, it is by default considered double value by the Android compiler, or not the Android compiler, Java compiler. Okay, so if you want that the compiler consider this particular specific value as a floating value, then you have to put a capital F at the end of that particular specific value. And because we are putting that float, and if you don't put that particular F, it will say that it is a double value and you are trying to save in a float, so it will give you an error message. So you need to make sure that you put that particular specific F at the end. It is not the part of the value, but it is just telling the Java compiler or Java compiler that this particular specific value 721.001, it should be considered as a floating value, not a double value. And then once you have put all those values inside our shared preferences using the editor, we need to commit. So when we commit, these particular specific values may be saved within that particular specific preference object, which is in the memory, and these values have not been stored in the XML file, which is with which that particular shared preferences object is associated. So if you want to do that, you have to write this particular specific line, editor.commit, editor.apply. So these are the two methods that you can use to save those informations permanently within your XML file in the background. And similarly, when you want to read the information for the reading, exactly the same way that we have created the shared preferences, now exactly the same way, the same name that we have provided, we need to provide the mode, and then we run that particular specific method again in the second time. Actually it will not create a new one, actually it will open already existing shared preferences, and then you can simply read the information out of it using that particular specific shared preferences. For reading, you don't need an editor. So you can simply say that int key is equal to shared preferences dot get integer value dot get boolean value dot get string dot get float, and then you have some specific, you need to provide the key, that key which is representing that specific integer value inside our shared preference, and this is the second parameter is the default value. For example, you are providing a specific key which actually does not exist inside our shared preferences, then what will happen, it will assign zero value, that is the default value, to our int underscore key variable. And similarly for the boolean, we need to provide a default value. Again for the string we also need to provide a default value. For the float we also need to provide default values. If that key exists inside our shared preferences, it will bring out the value from the shared preferences and assign it to our variable. But if it is not, then the default value will be assigned to our variables. So this is the shared preferences. I mean, this is a little bit confusing. It is a shared preferences, but it is shared among different activities. And now we will talk about the private shared preferences. Even the name is shared preferences, it is the same object, but it is a private, the private to one activity only, and we don't need to provide a name for that particular specific activity. Shared preferences as well, only one activity can access this particular specific shared preferences XML file. So creating or accessing the private shared preferences is exactly the same. How we can create, instead of giving the name, we only say that we, instead of using the get shared preferences, we are saying that get preferences, and we only need to provide the mode, and normally it is private. The reason is that it is only accessible within that particular specific activity. Okay, so we only need, here we in the get preferences we only need to the mode of access, the access right to that particular specific shared preferences. Other than that, if you look at that shared preferences is exactly the same class, and we are creating a specific variable for of the shared preferences class, and then we get that particular specific of create that particular specific object when we are running it for the first time, and the second time it actually open that already existing shared preferences file for us, or the object for us. Again, if you want to writing the information, we need an editor. So using the same way that SharedPreferences.Editor, we creating the editor variable, and then using our shared preferences object, we say that dot edit, it means it will open that particular specific file, and then we can edit and it will return me, and this particular specific method return me an editor, that we editor reference that we are going to save in our editor variable, and using that particular specific editor we can put those information inside our shared preferences, and at the end we need to commit exactly the same way that we are doing with the our shared preferences, which is shared among different activities. Here we are doing exactly the same thing, but the point is how we create that particular shared preferences object, and that particular shared preferences object is private to the activity or it is shared among different activities. Other than that, exactly the same way that we are going to do. If you want to write some information inside the shared preferences, then you need an editor object. You get that editor object, you have that particular shared preferences variable, you call the edit method, and it will return you that particular editor reference, and using that particular editor reference you can put the information inside that particular specific shared preferences object, and later on you can simply say commit, put all those information permanently save in that XML background XML file. And if you want to read it exactly the same way, here we don't need an editor. For reading we don't need an editor, we just need the shared preferences and then object, and then from that particular object we can simply say get integer value, get boolean value, get string value, get float value, and then we also need to provide the keys and default values for each. So this is the shared preferences. Now we will discuss about the activity state. I mean, the point is we say that we have shared preferences, whether they are private, whether they are shared among different activities. But the point is where we are going to use them. In the beginning, I told you that if we are reading if we are having a game inside our mobile, then maybe we want to save those information, some of the information like username, like highest score that has been achieved, so we can save those kind of informations inside the activity, so inside our specific shared preferences, and then we can use to give a personalized or customized response to our mobile application users. We can simply say that whenever that application is turning on, it's starting up, then it can simply say hi Abbas, good morning Abbas, good afternoon Abbas, good noon Abbas, good night, good evening. So these kind of personalized messages we can display on within our application that will give a sense of ownership to to this user, that this particular specific application know my name, it is giving me some greeting messages. So that is one of the purposes that again we can save the customized color scheme for that particular user. So whenever that particular application is going to run again, we will look into that particular shared preferences, getting all those color combinations or color preferences of that particular specific user, and apply them in the application UI design. So we need to save those information somewhere, and this is exactly where we can save those information, the shared preferences. Okay. So now we talk about activity state. We have already discussed that we have different state of the activity: running state, paused state, stop state, destroy state, starting state. So when it is done loading and now visible, it is in the running. Paused mean it is partially obscured. I mean, there is something is visible right in front of that activity, maybe a dialog box or something. So in that case, that particular specific application is in the paused state. Stopped mean it is no longer visible to the user, and destroyed mean that it is no longer active in the active memory. So these are different states, and this is again this is the life. When you start it, then on create method actually it is start creating that particular specific activity, and then we have on start method, on restore instance state, on resume, on save instance states, on pause, and then foreground. It is in the I mean still visible, but in the background here visible lifetime. Okay, on start, on stop, and on stop entire life cycle is there. So you can imagine that this particular pass, on resume and on pause, it is like we are inside that particular specific the activity is still visible in the background. Okay, on start, on stop mean that it is no longer visible. On restart and on start mean that it is going to come back again in the visual to the user. And then when we are removing that particular specific application, not application, it's an activity. So when we are removing that specific activity from the memory, then we call on destroy method automatically. It means we are shutting down that particular specific activity. So app in the foreground and focus, that's running, jump between activities in the same application and active, or same app and activity is still visible. We say that it is a paused, so we call the on pause and on resume. Jump between two apps or the activities, and activity is completely obscured, it is not visible to the user. It will be in the stopped state, and then we call the on stop and on start methods. Apps loaded or unloaded from the memory. When we are loading in the memory, we call it on create. When we are unloading from the memory, we are removing it from the memory, then we call the on destroy method. Now, if you can remember that we have that particular specific activity, we develop that specific application in which we have different names of those um, cartoon characters, or the what you can say, like Pokemon characters. And whenever we are clicking on some specific radio button which representing the name of that Pokemon or the cartoon character, it's changed that particular specific file. Now the point is, the current state of an activity instance state. So that is the current state. For example, we have clicked on the Michelangelo, it is showing me that particular Michelangelo picture. Again, remember that we have that our number game, and if we have a specific score, that is score 15. So this is and the numbers that is shown on that particular specific buttons, this is a state, because the other thing is going to remain in great work, game of the rules and these kind of things, this is remains same. But the point is, these numbers on those buttons, left and right buttons, and then the scores, this is representing, and then what message we are displaying to our user. So these four informations are the state of that activity. Similarly, on which specific radio button has been checked, and which specific image resource we are showing in that image view, that is also a specific state of the activity. Now, if we are in the portrait mode, and from that particular specific portrait mode we make it to the other way around, I mean, we are turning our mobile from the portrait mode into the, and sometimes it happens uh, mistakenly, because that particular specific angle that you are holding that particular specific mobiles, it say that it is in the automatically convert change from the portrait mode to the landscape mode automatically. It is not intention, but what happened in that particular specific process. And if you feel that here we have Michelangelo, we are showing the Michelangelo picture, but on the other hand we are selected the Michelangelo, but the picture is Donatello. Oh, what happened? I mean, we are in the portrait mode, we convert into the landscape mode, but this picture is going to be reinitialized with the Donatello, and Michelangelo is selected, but the picture is Donatello. So that's something that does not make sense. What's happening over there? So whenever we are in the portrait mode, what the Android system in the background do? If you are converting, if you are in the portrait mode and you change it to the landscape mode, it will destroy this particular portrait mode activity. Destroy it, it means that it will run those methods on stop, on pause, on stop method, and then on destroy method. So I will show you that particular specific thing when we are inside our class with the practical demonstration. So it actually will run those methods on pause, on stop, and on destroy method. It means this, it is going to destroy that particular specific activity and recreating that particular specific activity from scratch in the port landscape mode, in a different mode. Why it is being done? That is the default behavior of the Android. And why they are doing it? The reason is that we can have, because in the portrait mode we have different dimensions of the screen, but on the other hand in the landscape mode we have more width and we have less height. In the portrait mode we have more height and less width. So we can specify within our project that we want to show a different layout for our activity in the portrait mode, and we want to show a different layout activity. It means that that particular representing a different XML file, a different layout file will layout will be created in the landscape mode. So we can specify a separate layout file for the portrait mode because it has a different dimensions, different view, different look. On the landscape mode, we can also adopt a different layout, because now the height and width of the screen has been changed, and accordingly we want to adjust our design of the layout. So we can have a different layout in the portrait mode and the landscape mode. So this is possible within your project. You can specify that thing within your Android project. And whenever, so that's why what the Android system will do in the background, whenever you are converting your mobile from the portrait mode into your landscape mode, it actually destroy the portrait mode activity and create a new activity. And of course, in this particular specific scenario, we have not changed a single thing. It is the same exact layout file that we are using, whether it is in the portrait mode or in the landscape mode. But because it has created a new activity, this particular image view takes the default value. On the other hand, this particular Michelangelo is selected. Okay, so this is something which is sometimes also come back to that Donatello. But the point is, when we are going from portrait mode to the landscape mode, whether it is Donatello and it is showing the Donatello picture, it is in the perfect good state of activity, but we want to keep that particular specific state which is inside our what you can say that inside our portrait mode. We want to keep the same state of the activity when it is recreated inside the landscape mode. So for that particular purpose, we can save that particular specific information, the state of that particular specific activity inside the landscape portrait mode. We can save that inside our shared preferences, and whenever we are creating that particular landscape mode activity, we can restore the state of the activity instance state from our, we can, by reading some information from the shared preferences. And same can be done when we are moving from the landscape mode to the portrait mode. Okay, so this is will be much more visible inside our I mean, what you can say that inside our uh, inside the game activity. We are playing the game, we have the score 20, but when we are from this particular landscape portrait mode, we are converting ourselves, our mobile or the application, into the landscape mode. It recreate those information. Now if we look at that, these numbers has been changed and the score has become 0 again. If we are start playing the game inside our portrait mode, and we can get some marks here, we can earn some scores here, and then again when we convert from landscape mode to the portrait mode, the score will again go to 0. Well, this is not that the right thing to do, because the state of the activity is changing from that particular specific change in the modes, portrait mode and the landscape mode. So this is not a right thing to do. So what we can do, we can save the state. What is the state? Again, we need to define, depending on the application, depending on the activity we are in, the state can be changed. If we look at it, number game, these informations, the games rules, this the text view, these are exactly the same. They are not going to change because they are the hard coded. But these information, the left number, the left button number, the right button number, the message to the user, and the score information, these are the 4 information which represent the state of the activity. So we need to save these 4 informations inside our shared preferences, and whenever we are creating the new activity inside the landscape mode, we need to read those information and restore those information inside our what you can say that inside our uh, activity, so that the state of the activity remains same whether we are moving from the portrait mode to the landscape or landscape mode to portrait mode. So this is the one thing that we need to so secure save the current state in the preferences and restore them from the saved preferences on the transition. Whenever we are making that particular transition from the portrait to landscape or landscape to portrait, we can read those state of that activity from the shared preferences and restore inside our activity. Again, we need to reprogram our application game, number game application to store the highest user scores and the current score in the preferences and restore them on the transition. And now if you look at the highest score is not going to change. It should be there whenever we are opening that particular specific application. Maybe after 1 week we are trying to open that particular number game, it show me the same highest score which has been achieved by the user. Okay, so these are the things that we can save, and we can use the shared preferences to save those kind of informations. And then we can again, as I told you, that we can have a different layout for the portrait mode and for the landscape mode. We can specify these things, and definitely this will be one layout file, the one layout XML file, and this will be a separate second layout XML file. And I will show you if we can have different type of layouts for different modes. And that is the end of our theoretical part of the lecture. And definitely on Monday in our class we will I will show you how we can play with save the information in the shared preferences. What are the difference between the shared preferences and the private shared preferences. So I will show you all. Okay, hope you enjoy this particular specific video lecture, and I will upload this it on the Moodle link, and you can see it. Thank you.